Why did the sound of an envelope feel heavier than a bullet? It sat there on the metal desk, mocking her silence, a simple white thing with embossed edges and too much history trapped inside. She'd faced artillery fire, insurgents, and nights that never ended, but this was different, because this one carried her old name. Lieutenant General Rebecca Cole. A title carved in discipline, not affection. But whoever sent it, they didn't know she hadn't been Rebecca to that family in years. The seal on the back was still unbroken, but she already knew what it said. Haley was getting married. Not just married, marrying Major Andrew Foster. The irony hit her with surgical precision. 6 years since her mother's voice last crossed a state line. Not a birthday, not a condolence when her second deployment nearly took her hearing. Just silence. And now this, a perfect little weapon disguised as an invitation. The note inside didn't even bother pretending to care. Just one word in that familiar, cold script: behave. Outside her quarters in Stuttgart, the wind scraped against the flagpole, making it creak like an old bone. Inside, the air was sharp with polish and order, the kind of sterile calm that held her together more than comfort ever had. The steel bed, the pressed uniforms, the locked trunk that nobody touched. This was home now, discipline, not warmth. She turned the envelope over in her hand like it might change shape if she stared long enough. A knock, 2 short raps, Simmons. He always knocked like a soldier who didn't believe in hesitation. He entered before she even said, "Come in." "General," his eyes flicked toward the envelope. "I heard." Of course he had. Simmons had ears like radar and patience like granite. He'd known her since she was a fresh-faced captain with too much grit and not enough trust. "You going?" he asked. She didn't answer, just slid the envelope across the table. He picked it up, squinted at the gold lettering, and exhaled through his nose. "Foster," he muttered. "That's the kid you pulled out of that crater in Helmand, right?" "Same one." Her voice didn't move, didn't crack. He leaned back, studying her. "You saved his life, and now he's marrying your sister." The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was familiar, like every other silence she'd carried. Finally she asked, "You think I should go?" "That depends," he said, voice even. "You going to fight a war or bury a ghost?" She laughed once, not the kind that lightens anything, the kind that scrapes. "Maybe just watch one burn." He didn't smile. "Then go, but don't wear your stars like armor. Wear them like memory. Let them remember who you became without them." His words hung in the air long after he left. She stood by the window, watching a line of new recruits running drills below. Their voices echoed across the training field, eager, unbroken. She envied them just for a moment. That blind fire of youth before life sanded you down to resolve. When the gust rattled the window pane, she turned back to the closet. The dress uniform hung there, the one she hadn't worn since her father's funeral, the one she never got to speak at. She laid it flat on the bed, smoothing the sleeves as if she were touching old wounds. The memory hit harder than she expected. That day had smelled like rain and gunpowder. They buried her father with full honors, Marine Corps band, 21-gun salute. But no one saved her a seat on the front row. Her mother sat between Haley and Uncle Roy, her lips pressed into that permanent blade she called composure. When Rebecca approached, her mother never looked up. Haley did, just once. A glance sharp enough to slice. Then she turned back toward the flag-draped coffin, as if Rebecca was just another uniform out of place. Afterward, Barbara Cole, her mother, had placed a single hand on Rebecca's sleeve and whispered, "You shouldn't have come in uniform. It makes it look like you're trying to upstage the family." The family. The word had burned more than the desert sun ever could. She had walked away then, didn't look back, didn't write, didn't call. 6 years and 2 continents later, here she was holding a wedding invitation pretending to be reconciliation. And Andrew Foster. That name wasn't just a wound, it was a scar with breath. She still remembered that night in Helmand, the blast, the dust, the sound that wasn't sound anymore, just ringing. Andrew's leg had been nearly severed. He was bleeding out when she crawled through open hell to reach him. Her shoulder shredded with shrapnel, blood in her mouth. No time to think, only move. "Don't move," she had ordered, voice sharp through the comms. He froze. The metal plate under his boot was half exposed, a mine. The difference between alive and gone was one breath too heavy. She had crawled across gravel, elbows grinding into dirt, every nerve on fire, and when she reached him, her hands trembled so violently she could barely hold the detonator. But she did it. She disarmed it, saved him. He'd whispered, "I owe you," right before the medevac lifted him away. Now he was marrying her sister. Rebecca exhaled, slow, calm, surgical. Then she sat down and opened her laptop. Flight schedules, Richmond, Virginia, one stop in Frankfurt. Red Eye quiet, anonymous. She didn't inform base command, didn't even tell her driver. The ticket confirmation pinged her inbox 30 seconds later. She wasn't going to be welcomed. She was going to be seen for the first time in years. 3 years ago, she'd pulled Andrew Foster from a live minefield. In 2 weeks, he'd marry the woman who once told her on record that she was a disgrace to the Cole name. The irony tasted metallic. Hours later, she sat in seat 3C of a Lufthansa flight from Stuttgart to Dallas, staring out at a sky too soft for the weight she carried. The seat beside her was empty. She'd paid extra for that silence. The flight attendant smiled politely when she saw the ribbons on Rebecca's uniform. Offered champagne. Rebecca asked for water. Somewhere over the Atlantic, she closed her eyes. Not to sleep. She didn't know how anymore, but to block out the weight of what she was flying toward. Not war. Something worse. Family. The plane landed 20 minutes early. Dulles smelled like wax and overused sanitizer, clean, artificial, hollow. Customs was easy. A flash of her ID, a nod from the officer, no questions. Then her phone buzzed, unknown number. She almost ignored it, almost. "Hello." Well, that voice. Smooth, saccharine, soaked in mockery. "You actually came." "Haley." Rebecca stopped walking. The sound of her sister's voice pulled her back through years she thought she'd buried. "I didn't say I was coming to celebrate," Rebecca replied, already moving toward the escalator. "You didn't say anything for 6 years," Haley chirped too brightly. "So this is progress." There was no apology in her tone, not even hesitation. "I came because I was invited." "Right," Haley said, "because Mom guilted you into it." Rebecca said nothing. "Well, Andrew's looking forward to seeing you," Haley continued, the smile audible. "You two always had chemistry." Rebecca froze mid-step on the moving walkway. Her pulse didn't spike, didn't drop, just steadied. "That's not funny," she said. "I didn't mean it to be," Haley lied. The same polished cruelty she'd used in high school, turning venom into charm. The kind of voice that made teachers smile while cutting her sister open in silence. "Is that all?" Rebecca asked. "One more thing," Haley said sweetly. "Please don't show up in full uniform, it's not festive." Rebecca ended the call. Outside, Virginia bloomed in early spring. Dogwoods lined the roads. Cherry blossoms brushed the windshields of passing cars. A postcard of a world that pretended it had never been cruel. She drove through the old neighborhoods in silence. Every street corner, every cracked curb felt smaller than she remembered. Childhood had a way of enlarging things. Pain had a way of shrinking them back. When she turned onto her mother's street, she saw Mrs. Langford, the neighbor who always trimmed her hedges too perfectly, as if control was salvation. Mrs. Langford squinted. "Rebecca, my goodness, you're still in the military." "Yes, ma'am." "I thought you might have left after everything." "Some of us stay." She walked past without waiting for a reply. The coal house stood exactly as she remembered: white shutters, trimmed bushes, the kind of silence that wasn't peace, just repression polished to a shine. The porch light flickered, hesitant. Rebecca rang the bell. The smell hit first: lemon polish, her mother's signature, the scent of discipline. Barbara Cole opened the door in beige slacks and pearls, her hair wound tight like a noose. Her gaze swept down the uniform, pausing just long enough to turn respect into judgment. "Please," Barbara said, voice low taut, "don't ruin this for Haley." Rebecca didn't answer. Her silence had always been mistaken for rebellion, and that made it powerful. Inside, everything gleamed. The dining room, the chandelier, the family that never really was, 15 chairs, 14 bodies, one battlefield. She stood at the threshold, watching. Barbara fluttered between plates and napkins like a queen managing her illusion. Haley sat in silk, laughing too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. Rebecca's seat waited at the far end of the table, near the kitchen door. Not beside family. Beside function. She sat, the chair creaked like it disapproved. Haley lifted her glass. "To family," she sang. "To new beginnings," Barbara added, her eyes flicking toward Rebecca like a blade glinting in soft light. No one mentioned her. No one welcomed her home. When the colonel at the other end squinted and said, "You look familiar," Barbara cut in swiftly. "Oh, Rebecca, she's been stationed overseas. Security work." Haley smiled. "She guards doors." Laughter rippled, light, effortless. Rebecca didn't move, didn't flinch, just set her glass down gently. "The people I guard," she said, voice calm, "outrank this entire room." The silence that followed was almost holy. The chandelier didn't sway, the air didn't move, and for the first time in years they remembered who she was. But they still hadn't learned what that meant. And soon they would. Why did silence always sound louder at home? She could hear it even now, under the ticking clock, beneath the hum of the refrigerator, the kind of quiet that wasn't peace but pressure. After dinner, the house thinned out. Cousins left in little clusters, pretending they didn't notice her. The dishes clinked softly in the kitchen, where Barbara's perfection hid behind porcelain and avoidance. Rebecca stood by the doorway, still in uniform, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. The medals on her chest caught the light, tiny ghosts of past battles. She remembered Simmons' words, "Don't wear your stars like armor, wear them like memory." But here, memory was a battlefield too. She turned, found Haley in the living room. Her sister sat cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through her phone, a champagne flute balanced on one knee. "Big day tomorrow," Rebecca said quietly. Haley looked up, the faintest smirk curling her lip. "It's been a long time since you showed up for anything big." Rebecca didn't answer. She just let the silence answer for her. Haley leaned back, tapping at her phone. "Mom says you'll be sitting near the back at the ceremony. Less distraction." "Of course," Rebecca murmured. "You don't have to come, you know. I mean, no one's forcing you." Rebecca tilted her head slightly. "You invited me." Haley smiled thinly. That was Mom. She thought it would look good. "For you or for the cameras?" Haley didn't look up. "Does it matter?" Rebecca studied her, the practiced poise, the soft lilt, the way her sister could twist warmth into a weapon. It hadn't changed. "You really love him." Haley blinked. "Andrew, of course." Rebecca let that name sit between them. The weight of it, the dust, the blood, the desert heat, all of it still inside her somewhere. "I saved his life once," she said softly. Haley froze, the words cutting through the air like shrapnel. "I know," she said finally, voice flat. "You tell that story like it's your birthright." "I've never told it to anyone," Rebecca replied. "Not even to him." Haley's smile flickered. "Then maybe you should keep it that way." The tension between them wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It hummed quietly like a fuse. Rebecca turned away. "Good night, Haley." She left before her sister could find another way to wound her. The morning came dressed in gold light and false calm. Rebecca woke before dawn. Years of training had wired her that way. She stood at the window, watching the sky bruise from gray to amber. Her uniform lay folded on the chair. She didn't touch it. Instead, she chose the dress blues pressed, perfect, not to impress but to remind. When she stepped outside, the world smelled of spring, of fresh soil, of blooming lies. The church sat at the top of a hill, framed by white lilies and a banner that read "Forever begins today." Funny, she thought, forever had a strange sense of humor. She parked 2 blocks away, walking the rest of the distance in heels that didn't fit the terrain. The stone steps felt colder than they should have. Inside, light spilled through stained glass windows, slicing the air into ribbons of color. Every detail screamed control: the flowers, the ribbons, the exact placement of the pews. She paused at the entryway. The guest chart stood on a brass easel, names printed in looping script. She scanned down the list. No Rebecca. No General Cole. Just silence. At the very bottom, near the emergency exit, she saw it. R. Cole, table 12. Out of view, out of reach, exactly where they wanted her. She was still staring when Barbara appeared beside her, clutching a clipboard like it was a shield. "You clean up well," Barbara said, eyes flicking over her ribbons. "But remember, no press. If anyone asks what you do, say logistics." Rebecca turned slowly. "I command brigades." Her mother's smile didn't move. "And today you're a guest." Before she could respond, a photographer brushed past, camera flashing toward the bridal party. The lens never even turned her way. Rebecca stood still, watching. Andrew entered from the side aisle, tall, straight, his dress uniform gleaming beneath the church lights. He looked the same, older maybe, but not broken. His eyes swept the room once, and when they found her, he stopped. No smile, no nod, just recognition and something else, something that flickered then vanished. She wondered if he remembered the dirt, the blood, the minefield, the night she refused to leave him behind. Probably not. Men like him didn't forget, they just learned to bury it. The ceremony began. Haley glided down the aisle in white, flawless, radiant, the picture of grace. Cameras clicked like applause. Rebecca sat in the second-to-last row. The violin swelled. The priest spoke. And somewhere beneath the vows and the smiles, she could feel the old ache return, the kind that doesn't bleed but corrodes. When the priest invited close family forward for the blessing, Rebecca stood automatically. Reflex, habit. But Barbara's hand found her elbow before she could move. Light touch, iron control. "Let's not confuse things," her mother whispered. "This is Haley's day." Rebecca looked down at that manicured hand, then up at the altar. Haley and Andrew were kneeling, heads bowed. She could have stepped forward, could have shattered the illusion right there. Instead, she sat back down. Obedience had never fit her, but sometimes restraint spoke louder. The violinist began something sentimental. Cameras flashed. People wept. Rebecca stared ahead, eyes dry. The reception hall glittered like wealth pretending to be warmth. Chandeliers, crystal flutes, the kind of perfection that felt rehearsed. Her place card waited, small font, back corner, next to the catering door. R. Cole. No rank. She sat, folding her napkin carefully, as if the ritual might distract her from the tension crawling beneath her ribs. A waiter poured wine for the others, skipped her glass. "Non-drinking guest," he said. She didn't correct him. Across the room, Haley floated from table to table, radiant in a gown that sparkled under the lights. Every gesture was performance. Every laugh was a line rehearsed. Andrew stayed near her, hand resting gently at her back, the perfect groom. But his eyes, they never stayed long on anyone, not even on Haley. Rebecca watched in silence. A woman at the next table leaned over. "Excuse me, are you part of the security detail?" Rebecca smiled faintly, something like that. The woman nodded, satisfied. The lie cost nothing. Then came the toasts. Barbara stood first, glass raised. "To love and to loyalty," she said, "two things this family values above all." Rebecca almost laughed, almost. The room clinked glasses. Haley beamed. Andrew looked down at his drink. Then Haley took the mic. Her voice floated through the hall, sweet and clear. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight, especially family. To think, even my big sister made it all the way from wherever she's stationed now." Laughter trickled through the crowd. Rebecca didn't move. Haley's smile sharpened. "Guarding doors for greatness, right? Let's give her a round of applause for being the silent sentinel of the family." Applause, laughter. That hollow, echoing kind that stings worse than bullets. Barbara chimed in from her table. "She's the shame of this family, but at least she made it on time." That was it. The line that broke the air. The laughter turned sharper, meaner. Even the chandeliers seemed to shiver. Rebecca rose, not fast, not angry, deliberate. Across the room, Andrew was already watching her. He hadn't laughed. He hadn't moved. Just watched, steady as a soldier under fire. Haley faltered, her grip on the mic tightened. "Oh, come on," she said, the edge of nerves creeping into her voice. "It's a joke. Lighten up, Rebecca. You always took everything." Andrew stepped forward. The room froze. Each footfall echoed against marble, the kind of sound that turns laughter into prayer. He stopped one pace from her, straightened. Then he saluted. A perfect, crisp, military salute. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady, "please forgive my wife." Silence detonated like a blast wave. "This," he continued, still facing the crowd, "is Major General Rebecca Cole, my commanding officer." Gasps rippled like wind through silk. Haley's smile collapsed. The microphone slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a hollow thud. She swayed, pale as porcelain, and fainted. Barbara stood abruptly, her glass spilling champagne down her sleeve. "Rebecca," she started, but the word disintegrated halfway out. No one else spoke, no one breathed. The orchestra stopped mid-note. Forks hovered midair. Guests blinked like they were waking from hypnosis. Rebecca stood still, calm, expression unreadable. Andrew lowered his salute slowly, his spine straight, his eyes fixed ahead. A statement had been made. Then from the second row, a man in a navy blazer stood. Colonel Riordan, retired, old but unbowed. He raised his hand in a clean salute. Then another. General Park. Then a woman in her 50s. Then a fourth. 4 salutes. Not dramatic. Not forced. Just recognition. Barbara whispered something, but it vanished into the carpet. Rebecca didn't move, didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because dignity, when it finally stands, doesn't raise its voice. It just refuses to sit back down. Later she would barely remember the exit, the blur of faces, the stunned silence, the flash of cameras that weren't supposed to be there. All she remembered was the sound, not applause, not chaos, but a single note of understanding that reverberated through the hall. For years they had called her disgrace. Now they called her ma'am. And sometimes that's all justice needs, not vengeance, not noise. Just truth, standing unshaken in a room that once demanded silence. How long can a single moment echo? Rebecca had asked herself that 100 times in battle, after explosions, after silence, after the air itself seemed to remember pain. But nothing echoed like that ballroom silence. By the time the night ended, the chandeliers had stopped trembling, but the shame hadn't. Not hers, theirs. She walked out alone. No goodbyes, no glances. Only the sound of heels against marble, sharp, steady, deliberate. Each step was punctuation to a story they had tried to erase. Outside, the air was cold. Cameras flashed behind her, not paparazzi, guests who suddenly realized history was walking past them. She didn't turn. The night didn't need witnesses. It had enough already. The car was waiting, the same black sedan Barbara had arranged for her arrival. Ironic, she thought. The vehicle of exile now became her chariot of truth. She sat in the back seat, staring out the window as the mansion lights faded behind her. Somewhere inside that glittering house, a woman had just fainted, another was weeping, and 100 reputations were rewriting themselves. And Rebecca Cole, the daughter they buried in whispers, was finally alive again. The driver cleared his throat softly. "Ma'am, destination." "The Hilton," she said. Her voice didn't rise, didn't shake, it just existed like stone. He nodded and pulled onto the road. The hotel lobby smelled of leather and diplomacy, the kind of place where conversations cost more than truth. Rebecca walked through the marble corridor, her medals catching dim light. People turned. Some recognized her from the news. Others just felt the gravity that clung to her presence. She didn't check in. Her room was already reserved. Barbara Cole had made sure of that too, a family suite, floor 14, under the name R. Cole, guest of honor. She almost laughed at that, guest of honor. As the elevator doors closed, she caught her reflection in the mirrored panel. Her face looked composed, but her eyes were tired not from war, but from restraint, the kind that comes from years of being told to stay small. When she reached her floor, a voice called from the end of the hall. "Rebecca." She didn't turn right away. She didn't need to. She knew that voice better than her own heartbeat. Barbara stood near the lounge door, pearls still around her neck though one clasp hung loose. The perfection was cracking, and she was pretending not to notice. "Can we talk?" Barbara asked. Rebecca's first instinct was to walk past her, but something, maybe habit, maybe mercy, made her stop. "5 minutes," Rebecca said. Barbara nodded, relief flickering behind her eyes. "The lounge is quieter." The lounge was velvet and dim, the kind of room built for private apologies that never really meant it. A single lamp lit the table between them. 2 cups of coffee sat untouched, steam fatting like pretense. Barbara was the first to speak. "You certainly made a statement tonight." Rebecca leaned back in her chair. "You call that a statement, I call it survival." Barbara's smile was tight, diplomatic. "The media is buzzing, some of it's flattering, some not. You could have handled it differently." Rebecca tilted her head, differently as in silent. Her mother's eyes flickered. "No, I mean more gracefully. There are ways to command respect without humiliation." Rebecca laughed once, sharp and clean. "Gracefully, that's what you call pretending to disappear." Barbara's fingers tightened around her cup. "We weren't prepared for that moment. No one was, not even your sister fainting." "My daughter fainting," Rebecca interrupted. Her tone didn't rise, but it carved through the air like a blade. Barbara blinked. "What?" "You said my daughter." Her mother exhaled sharply. "I meant Haley." "I know who you meant," Rebecca said softly. "It just sounded like, for once, you remembered you had two." Silence. The kind that doesn't just hang, it presses. Barbara took a breath. "I didn't come to fight." "Then why are you here?" Barbara hesitated. Then she leaned forward, her voice low, urgent. "I thought maybe you'd be willing to make a statement, to the press." Rebecca blinked. "A statement?" "Yes," Barbara said quickly. "Just to clarify things, that we misunderstood, that the comments tonight were taken out of context, that." "You want me to clean up your discomfort," Rebecca said flatly. Her mother's poise faltered for the first time. "Not a lie, just context." Rebecca's voice lowered. "Context is what cowards use when they run out of honesty." Barbara's eyes flashed. "I was protecting the family." "No," Rebecca said quietly. You were protecting an image. Her words didn't shout. They landed heavy, like truth dropped from altitude. Barbara's hands trembled slightly. You have no idea what it was like. The scrutiny, the questions, your deployments, your injuries. People talked, Rebecca. They pitied us. Then you should have been proud, Rebecca said. But you were embarrassed that your daughter didn't smile on command. Her mother's voice cracked. I made choices, some imperfect, but I never stopped caring. You just stopped calling. Barbara looked down at her hands. The silence between them stretched, old, familiar, jagged. I didn't know how to protect you without erasing you, Barbara said finally. You were loud in a world that punished loud women. I wasn't loud, Rebecca replied. I was visible. There's a difference. Barbara looked up slowly. I thought if we distanced you, people would forget. The scandal would fade. You could still have a life somewhere else. You didn't erase me, Rebecca said. You made me unforgettable. Her mother's chin trembled. Do you hate me? Rebecca stared at her, long enough that the question started to sound like a prayer. No, she said finally, I outgrew you. Barbara swallowed hard. Is there anything I can do now? Rebecca's expression softened, but not enough to break. Yes, don't rewrite my story after I'm gone. Her mother blinked. If someone asks why I don't come home, Rebecca continued, don't say I was distant. If they ask what happened, don't say it was complicated. Tell them you made a choice, and so did I. Barbara reached across the table, tentative, trembling. The same hands that once pushed her away now hovered inches from asking forgiveness. Rebecca didn't pull back, but she didn't take them either. She let her mother's fingers hang in the air, caught between past and regret. Barbara's voice broke into something she hadn't used in years, softness. I never meant to hurt you. Rebecca looked her in the eye. People like Haley don't stab. They whisper and let the knife fall on its own. Her mother's eyes glistened. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Rebecca stood. You raised a performer, not a partner. I hope you like the show. She turned, but before she reached the door, Barbara said something faint, almost to herself. She hasn't been the same since the wedding. Rebecca stopped. She never had to be, Rebecca said quietly. She got to just exist. I had to survive. Barbara exhaled. Rebecca, I'm sorry. Rebecca didn't turn around. So am I. Then she walked out, not because she wanted to leave, but because there was nothing left to stay for. In the elevator down, the air felt thinner. The numbers blinked, passed like seconds she could never get back. Her reflection in the metal door was calm, but her chest burned. She had survived firefights easier than that conversation. The truth was heavier than armor, and sometimes it was sharper too. When she stepped into the lobby, a bellhop handed her an envelope. This came for you, ma'am. No return address, just her name handwritten. Rebecca opened it carefully. Inside, a note in Andrew's handwriting. It read, Rooftop, 2200 hours. She stared at the words for a long time, then folded the note once, slid it into her pocket, and walked toward the elevator again. The war wasn't over. It had just changed battlefields. What do you say to the man whose life you once saved, and who later married your silence? Rebecca didn't know, but she went anyway. The rooftop bar sat above the city like a secret, high glass walls, amber lights, the hush of luxury masking the ache beneath it. The night wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of bourbon and rain. She didn't sit. She stood at the edge, looking over the skyline where buildings blinked like half-kept promises. Andrew was already there, hands resting on the railing, drink half gone, tie loosened, jacket unbuttoned. He didn't turn when she stepped closer. I didn't think you'd come, he said. You asked. I didn't think that mattered. Rebecca exhaled. It usually doesn't. The space between them pulsed with memory, not romance, not regret, but something heavier, history. For a while neither spoke. The city hummed below them, the kind of sound that makes silence feel earned. Finally, Andrew said, "You want to talk about Helmond?" Rebecca's eyes stayed on the horizon. "Do you?" He nodded slowly. "You saved my life." She turned. "That's old news." "Not to me." For a moment the sound of traffic below felt distant, replaced by the hum of an old comlink, the ringing in her ears, the dirt, the blood. "You don't remember," she said softly. "But I do. Every inch, every second. You were bleeding out and I was crawling through gravel, praying the mine wouldn't trip before I got to you." "I remember," he said. "You told me not to move. I didn't." Rebecca's jaw clenched. "You said I owe you. I wish you hadn't." "Why?" "Because now it feels like you paid that debt by marrying the person who tried to destroy me." Andrew's eyes flicked down. The wind caught the edge of his collar. He didn't answer right away. "She told you about that?" he finally asked. "She didn't have to." "You're not wrong," he said quietly, "but you're not entirely right either." Rebecca studied him, the man who once cried into the dirt as she pulled him out of death, now struggling to find the courage to meet her gaze. "Then enlighten me," she said. Andrew sighed, setting his glass down. "When I came home, I was different. Broken, you know that, the nightmares, the noise. I didn't know how to be normal. Haley, she offered calm, or I thought she did." "She offered control," Rebecca said. He smiled faintly. "Same thing at first." Rebecca looked away. "And when she mocked me tonight, you let her. You stood there." His shoulders stiffened. "I wanted to stop her." "But you didn't." "I was a coward," he admitted, "because I thought if I stayed silent, the storm would pass." Rebecca turned back toward him, her eyes like command steel. "Silence never ends a storm, Andrew. It just drowns you quieter." He looked down. "You're right." The wind caught between them, carrying the faint sound of distant sirens. "She doesn't know about Helmond, does she?" Rebecca asked. He shook his head. "I never told her. I knew she'd twist it, turn it into something shiny. The night you saved me, she'd find a way to make it her story." Rebecca's lips curved, not in a smile, but something close to pity. "She already did. She married the man I risked my life for. She turned survival into spectacle." Andrew's voice was quiet. "She doesn't understand consequence. She never has." "She doesn't have to," Rebecca said. "People like her are protected by people like us." He met her gaze then, really met it. "You think I don't know what I owe you?" She shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. You already paid me back the day you saluted in front of everyone. That was your redemption, not mine." He laughed bitterly. "Redemption, that's generous." Rebecca studied him. "Then why call me here?" He hesitated, then said, "Because you deserve to hear it from me." "What?" "That I knew." Rebecca froze. "Knew what?" He looked at her. "About the tip, the one that stalled your promotion." For the first time that night, her composure cracked just slightly. "She sent it." He nodded. "I recognized her phrasing, the timing, the vocabulary, but I couldn't prove it, and I didn't want to believe it. I told myself I was imagining things." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You were." Andrew's throat worked, guilt weighing every syllable. "I should have said something, warned you, but I was still trying to be respectable. The good fiancé, the soldier who didn't make trouble." Rebecca stepped closer. "Respectable men don't protect liars." He flinched. "I thought she was good for me," he said. "You were unreachable, Rebecca. You carried storms like medals. She was calm." Rebecca's tone softened just a little. "She wasn't calm, she was easy. There's a difference." He laughed quietly, bitterly. "Yeah, I figured that out about a week after the engagement." The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was tired, human. Finally, Rebecca asked, "Why didn't you end it?" Andrew turned toward the edge of the roof. Below, headlights moved like ghosts through the streets. "Because leaving would have meant explaining why. and that meant bringing you into it. I thought keeping you out of it was the kinder thing." "Kindness is just cowardice with better PR," Rebecca said. He exhaled long and low. "You always had a way with words." "No," she said, "just with silence." For a while they stood without speaking. The city breathed beneath them. Somewhere a siren wailed, then faded. "I followed your career," Andrew said finally. "Every promotion, every speech. I clipped the article when you got your second star. I kept it." Rebecca blinked. "Why?" "Because I respected you," he said, "and because I couldn't admit I loved the wrong Cole." That landed like a slow explosion, quiet, inevitable. She didn't answer, didn't react, just let the words dissolve into the night. "I don't need your confession," she said finally. "I needed your spine 6 years ago." He looked down. "You have every right to hate me." "I don't," she said. "You're not worth that much energy." For a second, that hurt more than anger ever could. Then softer, "But I did expect you to be better." He nodded, accepting the sentence. "So what now?" "Now," Rebecca said, "you live with what you know. You wake up next to the woman who sold your commanding officer for convenience, and you ask yourself if the bed still feels warm." He looked at her, voice almost breaking. "And you?" Rebecca turned toward the skyline, where dawn was beginning to leak through the clouds. "I'll do what I've always done. Survive." He stepped closer, just enough that the air between them shifted. "Rebecca." She cut him off gently. "Don't ever use my name like you own it." He stopped. Her voice softened, almost kind. "You don't get to say it anymore." He nodded once, then quietly, "You deserved better." "I earned better," she corrected. "Deserving has nothing to do with it." She turned to leave, but paused when she reached the door. "Andrew," she said, without looking back. He lifted his head. "Next time someone mocks a soldier in front of you, remember who bled for your comfort." Then she was gone. The door clicked shut. The sound lingered. Andrew stayed by the railing long after, the wind pulling at his sleeve, the glass in his hand trembling. Somewhere in the distance, the city lights flickered like distant gunfire, fading one by one. He realized too late that some debts can't be paid, only carried. Rebecca didn't sleep that night. She packed instead, precise, quiet, methodical, every movement deliberate. Discipline was the only piece she trusted. At dawn, she stood by the window, watching light crawl over the Potomac. The phone on the nightstand buzzed, another unknown number. "General Cole," a man's voice said. "This is Captain Marks from the Pentagon Public Affairs Office. We'd like to schedule a briefing regarding last night's events." "Briefing?" "Yes, ma'am. The press coverage has been extensive. We'd like to help you control the narrative." Rebecca stared out at the sunrise, her reflection framed by gold light and exhaustion. "You can't control truth," she said. "You can only delay it." He hesitated. "Ma'am, if you don't respond, they'll write it for you." "Then let them," she said. "I'm done hiding behind polite lies." She ended the call. The silence afterward felt cleaner than it had in years. Her bags were packed, her orders self-written. No command, no escort, no apology. She slipped her phone into her jacket pocket, straightened her collar, and whispered to the empty room. "They wanted quiet. Now they'll get it, but on my terms." She picked up her duffel, opened the door, and stepped into the hallway. Downstairs, the morning news played on a muted television in the lobby. A headline scrolled across the screen. "Major General Cole's family drama goes viral. A salute heard around the world." Rebecca almost smiled. They finally spelled her name right. Outside, the city was waking, commuters, sirens, sunlight, chaos. She moved through it like a ghost in uniform, unseen yet unmistakable. For years, she'd been the silence they wanted. Now she was the silence they feared. And this time, she wasn't leaving the truth behind. Airports are the only places where everyone is leaving something. Rebecca liked that. Departure had always felt more honest than arrival. Reagan National buzzed with its usual chaos, rolling wheels, loudspeaker calls, coffee, and hurry. She moved through it in civilian clothes, duffel slung over one shoulder, hair unpinned. She looked like anyone else trying to disappear, but she never really could. At gate C-23 she stopped for a moment. The glass reflected her back to herself, posture still too straight, eyes still scanning exits, instincts still on duty. She told herself this flight was just another redeployment, only this time the mission was her own life. Then the flash went off. Not lightning, cameras. The first voice cut through the hum like a blade. "General Cole, can we get a comment on the wedding?" She blinked against the sudden glare. Another camera raised, another voice. "Ma'am, were you aware the bride would?" And then there were 6 of them, maybe more. Reporters, vloggers, bloggers, faces she didn't recognize, voices overlapping, urgent, hungry. The security officer at the checkpoint started toward her, but she lifted one hand. "Stand down," she said quietly. Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried. Years of command still lived in it. The reporters froze for half a breath, then leaned closer, smelling story. Rebecca's eyes found a small podium off to the side, a flimsy stand set between the flag display and a rack of tourism brochures. She walked toward it slowly. No dramatics, just gravity. They followed. When she reached the podium, she turned and faced them. "I know why you're here," she began. Her voice wasn't amplified, yet it cut cleanly through the noise. "You want a quote, a reaction, a headline sharp enough to slice and soft enough to sell." No one spoke. She looked at them one by one. Young faces, older ones, people who'd never seen the inside of a battlefield but lived for conflict anyway. "I'm not my family's failure," she said, calm as stone. "I'm their silence made visible." Cameras clicked again, but slower now. "For years," she continued, "I served my country while being written out of my own story. I wore a uniform while being told I stained the family name. I earned my rank in blood, not approval." A young reporter near the back lowered her phone. Another just mouthed the word "wow." Rebecca reached into her jacket and pulled out a single sheet of paper, folded once. The seal at the top read Department of Defense, Public Affairs Division. "As of today," she said, "I'm launching the Resilience Foundation. It's a support network and legal resource for service members whose careers were damaged by personal betrayal, by spouses, families, or friends. Because sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people who swear they love you." A ripple of murmurs, cameras clicked faster. "This isn't revenge," she said. "It's visibility. If you've been erased, sidelined, gaslit, disowned, listen to me. You still serve, you still matter." A pause, then the sound of keyboards stopped altogether. Someone finally asked, "General Cole, are you saying your family sabotaged your career?" Rebecca gave the smallest shrug. "You're welcome to connect your own dots. I've already connected mine." Soft laughter, nervous, respectful. She let the silence return. Then a movement at the edge of the crowd. A young cadet, barely 19, uniform crisp, face pale. He stepped forward, heels clicking together. He saluted. Rebecca returned it, slow, deliberate. No words were exchanged. None were needed. She turned toward the gates, duffel over her shoulder. Reporters shouted after her, but the questions blurred into static. As she reached security, her phone buzzed. "Pentagon urgent." The text read, "We need to talk." She almost smiled. They stayed quiet for years. Now they wanted conversation. She slipped the phone into her pocket and kept walking. The Pentagon briefing room was colder than she remembered. Not temperature, but temperature of spirit. Polished wood, navy carpet, the echo of power in every corner. She stood behind a steel lectern, hands resting lightly on either side. The screen behind her glowed with a single phrase, the Resilience Protection Protocol. Rows of brass filled the seats, generals, analysts, a few civilians. At the end of the front row, Admiral Kitchener, silver-haired, expression skeptical, the kind of man who still called a woman emotional when she raised her voice. Rebecca began. This protocol addresses an unspoken fracture in our chain of command. Officers and enlisted personnel who experience personal betrayal, spouses, family, or internal networks, often suffer in silence. Careers stall. Reputations tarnish. We lose soldiers not to battle but to betrayal. Slide 1. Retention data. Slide 2. Internal complaints that never escalated. Slide 3. Suicidality trends linked to defamation. Our response right now is reactive, she said. We patch holes instead of building walls. Admiral Kitchener lifted a hand. With respect, General Cole, this sounds more personal than structural. Rebecca met his gaze. All policy is personal, she said evenly. Otherwise it's propaganda. A faint ripple through the room. The Undersecretary of Defense leaned forward, listening. She continued. We have protocols for battlefield trauma, for combat loss, but what about betrayal from those we're told are safe? When a mother leaks her child's record, when a sister sabotages a clearance, when a spouse trades your trust for attention, these aren't gossip, they're operational threats. Silence again, thicker now. Rebecca let it breathe before finishing. We train our people to survive war. It's time we teach the institution to defend them from peace. Then she stepped back. No applause, that wasn't how these rooms worked, but heads nodded, pens moved. The undersecretary folded his hands and said evenly, "We'll fund it." That was enough. That was everything. Hours later, she walked out into the sunlight spilling over the Potomac. Reporters waited at the gates, but this time they didn't shout. They just watched her pass. One whispered, she changed policy with a sentence. Rebecca didn't turn. Change wasn't a headline, it was a habit. She crossed the bridge alone, wind lifting her hair. Her phone vibrated once more, this time from an unknown number. She answered. "Ma'am," a young voice said, "this is Private Davis. My co said to tell you thank you. He read your proposal aloud this morning." Rebecca closed her eyes. "Tell him to keep reading," she said softly. "Yes, ma'am." The line went dead, leaving only the rush of wind and the faint hum of distant traffic. For the first time in years, silence felt like peace. That night she sat by the window of her temporary quarters, lights of the city reflecting off the Potomac like scattered metals. Her laptop glowed with incoming messages, volunteers, donors, testimonials. Subject, they said I was crazy. Thank you for proving I was. Subject, my brother was discharged after he spoke up. Can your foundation help? She read each one carefully, answering some, flagging others for the morning. Then a new message arrived, from a sender she didn't expect. From Andrew Foster. Subject, no title. She hesitated, then opened it. You were right. Silence doesn't end a storm. It just drowns you quieter. I've filed for discharge. I'm not running anymore. I'll testify to everything if it helps your protocol. Lay. Rebecca stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she hit reply. Do it because it's right. Not because I asked. She sent it, closed the laptop. The night outside was deep blue, steady calm. She poured herself water, not whiskey, and stood by the window watching her own reflection fade into the glass. Tomorrow would bring noise, committees, interviews, more headlines. But tonight was quiet, and she finally owned that quiet. Her voice, her cause, her silence, all reclaimed. Sometimes redemption doesn't roar. It simply speaks once clearly enough that the world has to stop talking. What does home mean when it stopped being safe? Rebecca had been asking herself that since childhood, but she'd never had the courage to answer. Until now. 2 weeks after the Pentagon briefing, she drove back to the old Cole estate, the same house where she'd been uninvited and unwelcome for years. Only this time, she didn't need an invitation. This time, she wasn't coming as someone seeking peace. She was bringing it with her. The drive was quiet country roads, open fields, sunlight breaking through the clouds like forgiveness that had taken its time arriving. In the passenger seat sat a small envelope, no medals, no apology notes, just a folded copy of her foundation's first policy draft, stamped approved. The house came into view, still immaculate, still hiding secrets behind white columns and trimmed hedges. Rebecca parked, cut the engine, and sat still for a moment. Her hand tightened on the steering wheel. The hum of memory was loud laughter that wasn't kind, dinners where she was invisible, her mother's voice saying, "Just let it go, Rebecca. Don't make a scene." She opened the door. Gravel crunched beneath her boots, the same sound it made in Afghanistan when she'd walked away from wreckage. Only this time, she was walking toward it. The front door opened before she reached it. Barbara stood there, older, smaller, eyes softer, not makeup soft, regret soft. "Rebecca," she breathed. "Mom." It had been years since either word felt honest, but now neither carried anger, just weight. They stood for a long moment without moving. The wind stirred the curtains behind Barbara, the scent of rosemary and rain drifting from the kitchen. "Can I come in?" Rebecca asked. Barbara nodded quickly. "Of course." Inside, the house was as she remembered, spotless, too perfect, every detail screaming control. Yet it felt different, quieter. There were no servants, no music, no noise to hide behind. Just two women and the space between them. Barbara gestured toward the living room. "Would you like something to drink?" "Water's fine." They sat opposite each other, the same seats they had used years ago when Rebecca had tried to explain why she joined the military. The same silence followed them now. Barbara poured water into a crystal glass, hands shaking slightly. "I saw your press conference," she said finally, "and the new policy, it's extraordinary." Rebecca nodded. "It's necessary." Barbara's eyes glistened. "You've done something good, something I should have been proud of all along." "Should have," Rebecca repeated softly. Barbara looked down. "I know." Rebecca took a sip of water, setting the glass down carefully. "Why did you call me here?" Barbara hesitated. "Because I don't want our last memory to be that night." Rebecca leaned back. "You think it can be rewritten?" Barbara shook her head. "No, but maybe it can be faced." There was a long pause, the kind that feels like standing at the edge of something deep. Then Barbara whispered, "She's here." Rebecca didn't react right away. "Haley." "Yes." "Why?" She asked to be, said she wanted to apologize. Rebecca's expression didn't change, but her pulse did, after the cameras turned off. Barbara flinched. "Rebecca, please." Rebecca's voice was calm. "Fine, let's hear it." Footsteps sounded on the stairs, soft, hesitant. Haley appeared in the doorway wearing a pale blue dress, hair in the same effortless curls she'd always loved to show off. But the shine was gone. Her eyes were swollen, her voice thinner. "Hi," she said. Rebecca's answer was a simple, "Hello." Haley stepped closer. "You look different." Rebecca gave a faint smile. "So do you." "I deserve that," Haley said quietly. "No," Rebecca replied. "You earned worse, but I'm too tired to deliver it." Haley looked down. "I didn't come for a fight. I came because," she hesitated, searching for words that didn't exist. "I was wrong." Rebecca didn't move. "About what? Mocking me, lying, or building your marriage on something that wasn't yours?" "All of it," Haley said quickly. "I thought you made me small, that every time you succeeded, it reminded everyone that I hadn't. I wanted attention so badly I forgot what respect looked like." Rebecca's tone was steady. "And now?" Now I'm married to a man who can't look at me without guilt. The media's tearing me apart, and I can't sleep knowing what I did to you." Rebecca studied her for a long moment. "That's not guilt, Haley. That's consequence." Haley's lip trembled. "You have every right to hate me." Rebecca shook her head slowly. "I don't hate you, I pity you." That cut deeper than hate ever could. "You've always been chasing applause," Rebecca continued softly. "But applause fades, respect doesn't." Haley's voice cracked. "Can you forgive me?" Rebecca's silence lasted so long that Barbara shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Then Rebecca said, "Forgiveness isn't a favor, it's freedom, and I already gave it to myself." Haley's eyes filled. "So that's it?" "No," Rebecca said. "That's the beginning. You get to live with who you were and choose who you'll be next. Just don't do it for me. Do it because you're finally tired of pretending." Haley covered her face, shoulders shaking. Barbara reached for her, but Rebecca raised a hand gently. "Let her cry," she said. "That's the first honest thing she's done in years." The room was quiet except for Haley's sobs, raw, human, real. When she finally looked up, her voice was small. "What happens now?" Rebecca stood, picking up her duffel. "Now we all move on, separately." Barbara rose too. "Rebecca, wait." Rebecca paused. Her mother stepped closer, hesitated, then said softly, "I'm proud of you." Rebecca turned slightly. "Then say it louder next time. Someone else might need to hear it." Barbara's eyes filled, but Rebecca stayed calm. There were no more arguments left between them, only understanding. The kind that doesn't erase the past but accepts its shape. She looked at both of them, mother and sister, women who had defined her pain and now stood at its end. "You taught me something," she said quietly. "That dignity doesn't come from who claps for you. It comes from who you become when they don't." Neither woman spoke. There was nothing left to add. Rebecca walked to the door, sunlight spilling across the floor like an open invitation. Outside, the wind was soft, the air lighter than it had been in years. She breathed deeply, not out of relief but out of release. The drive back was wordless. Fields blurred past. Music played quietly, something old, something she hadn't heard since deployment. Halfway down the highway, her phone buzzed. "Private Davis. Ma'am, we've got 47 sign-ups for the foundation in under a day. Thought you'd want to know." Rebecca smiled faintly. "Good, keep going," she texted back. At the next stoplight, she pulled over by a small roadside diner, the kind with coffee that tasted like grit and hope. She went inside, ordered black coffee, and sat near the window. An older veteran at the counter recognized her. "You're that general, right? The one who told the truth on TV." She nodded once. "That's me." He grinned. "Good, about time someone did." Rebecca smiled. "About time someone listened." They both laughed softly, a shared language between survivors. She finished her coffee, left a tip, and stepped back outside. The sky had shifted, gray giving way to orange, like the world itself was exhaling. She looked up and whispered, half to herself, half to the ghosts that had followed her for years, "It's done." But she knew it wasn't done. It was beginning again, just cleaner, quieter, truer. That night she sat on her porch back at her base quarters, wind rustling through the nearby trees. No medals, no cameras, no applause, just the low hum of peace. She took out her journal, the one she'd kept during deployments, and wrote a single line. "You can lose everything and still win yourself back." Then she closed it. The stars were out, quiet and steady. Somewhere far away, the coal estate lights were dimming, and in that stillness, Rebecca felt something rare. Not victory, not revenge, just peace earned, not given. And for the first time in her life, that was enough. Peace never lasts. Not for soldiers. It just pauses long enough to make you believe it might. Rebecca learned that truth again 2 weeks later. The day had started quietly, coffee on her porch, morning sun cutting through fog, the faint echo of a bass siren in the distance. She'd been reading letters from veterans who joined her foundation, handwritten notes, raw and trembling. "You gave me back my name. My family stopped calling, but your words reminded me why I serve. You turned silence into armor. Thank you." She smiled faintly at that last one. Silence into armor. Yes, that felt right. Then the phone rang. Unknown number, Washington area code. "Cole," she answered, voice steady. "General, this is Colonel Avery with NATO Command. I'm sorry to disturb your leave, ma'am, but we have a situation that requires your expertise." Rebecca's posture straightened automatically. The instinct was instant, ingrained. "Go on." An Allied convoy went dark outside Kandahar. One of the local liaisons claimed sabotage. "We've confirmed American personnel were embedded with the team." Rebecca's jaw tightened. "Casualties?" "Unknown, but it's escalating. They requested your advisory input off the record at first. They trust your judgment." "Who signed off on that?" "Joint Task Command, direct authorization." There was a pause, the kind that carried ghosts. Kandahar. Of all the places. That ground still lived in her nightmares. Avery continued carefully. "I understand you've transitioned into public work, but they said you're the only one who can connect the local signals data to the internal clearance logs. You wrote half the protocol, ma'am." Rebecca closed her eyes. The hum of memory began again, sand, smoke, radios, silence. "Send the files," she said quietly. "Ma'am." "I'll review. No promises beyond that." "Yes, ma'am, sending now." The call ended. Her laptop pinged with encrypted attachments, intel reports, satellite maps, casualty estimates. She opened the folder. Lines of coordinates blinked on the screen like old scars reopening. For a long time she just stared. Then she whispered, "You said you were done, Cole, so why does it still feel like you're waiting to deploy?" The truth was simple. Peace had always felt like exile. Hours later, she was walking down the corridors of the Pentagon again. Not in uniform this time, civilian suit, dark gray, hair pulled back, eyes calm. But the soldiers saluted anyway. Respect doesn't need rank, it recognizes presence. She reached the NATO operations wing, where Colonel Avery met her. Younger, sharp-eyed, respectful. "Ma'am," he said, "it's an honor." She gave a small nod. "Flattery, not intel, Colonel. Let's see what we've got." In the briefing room, screens glowed with satellite footage and intercepted transmissions. The air smelled like recycled urgency. Avery explained, Convoy Delta 6 was rerouted last minute. No authorization trail. The signal came from someone with U.S. clearance, level 4 or higher. That's what threw everyone off. Rebecca's brow furrowed. "You mean it was an inside leak?" "That's the working theory. They used your own comms encryption protocols. That's why Command requested you." She scanned the data feed. Something about the pattern of timestamps tugged at her memory. Not the message, the silence between them. "The gaps," she murmured. "Ma'am." "These comm intervals," she said, pointing. "They're not random, they're mirrored. Someone was timing responses manually, a mimic system." Avery frowned. "Meaning?" "Meaning whoever did this wasn't an amateur. They studied my communication cadence." A long pause, then realization. "You think it's someone who served under you?" Rebecca exhaled slowly. "Or beside me." That night she stayed in the secure quarters upstairs, the same suite she'd used during deployment briefings years ago. Everything looked the same. The lamp's angle, the clock's hum, even the faint scratch on the window pane she'd left there one restless night before flying out. She sat on the bed, laptop open, cross-referencing data. Each file, each signal, each anomaly. It was methodical, clinical, but inside, something was shifting. Duty, guilt, memory, all threading together again like a net she thought she'd escaped. At 200 hours she froze. One call sign repeated across multiple layers, Falcon 13. Her old tactical alias. No one should have access to that, no one. Her fingers tightened around the mouse. Who the hell? Then another alert popped up, unauthorized login attempt, same encryption signature. Someone was using her identity in real time. Her pulse steadied, not panic, not fear, just the quiet focus of someone who'd lived through chaos before. She typed rapidly, tracing the signal bounce. It pinged through 3 countries, then froze on one location, Bagram Air Base. Rebecca whispered, "Of course." The base she'd left behind 6 years ago, the one where everything had changed. At dawn, she walked into command ops, sleeves rolled up, hair damp from a rushed shower, coffee in hand. Avery was already there, bleary-eyed but alert. "Ma'am, we saw the same breach. You traced it faster than our system." "Because I've seen this before," Rebecca said. "Who's stationed at Bagram right now with access to NATO clearance?" Avery typed quickly. "Checking, there's a Captain Elias Rowe. He was in your old task force rotation." Rebecca's breath caught for a fraction. Rowe. A field technician. Brilliant, unstable, loyal, until loyalty got inconvenient. "He was flagged for insubordination 2 years ago," Avery said, "but reinstated under special circumstances." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. Whose signature reinstated him? Avery clicked through the files. Andrew Foster. The room went silent. Rebecca stared at the screen. Of course. It wasn't just ghosts now. It was unfinished business. 12 hours later, she was on a flight to Kabul under civilian clearance. No official orders, no entourage, no flag. Just Rebecca Cole, once again walking into fire without waiting for permission. The cargo plane rattled through turbulence. She sat near the rear, headset on, eyes closed. Each vibration in the hull felt like memory shaking loose. When the plane touched down, the air was heavy with dust and distance. Soldiers glanced at her curiously as she stepped off, some saluting instinctively, others whispering, "Is that her?" At the Bagram command office, she was greeted by a familiar face, Major Santos, her old logistics officer. "Ma'am," Santos said, a mix of shock and relief. "Didn't think I'd ever see you here again." "Neither did I," Rebecca said. "Where, Rowe?" "In holding. Tried to access restricted servers using your Falcon 13 clearance. Claims he was following orders." "Whose?" "He wouldn't say." Rebecca exhaled through her nose. "Take me to him." The interrogation room was small, bare, cold. Rowe sat chained at the wrists, eyes sunken but defiant. When Rebecca entered, he blinked. "General Cole." "Captain." He smirked faintly. "Didn't think you'd come yourself. Thought you were too busy saving reputations." Rebecca pulled up a chair across from him. "You used my clearance code. That's not a mistake, that's a death wish." "I was following orders," Rowe said. "Whose?" "Yours." She leaned forward. "Try again." He smiled, but it wasn't amusement, it was fear pretending to be bravery. "Foster said it was for your foundation. Said you needed logistics data for veterans overseas. I didn't question it." Her chest tightened. "Andrew sent you my clearance." Rowe nodded. Encrypted message, same tone, same signature. Rebecca's pulse went still. "He cloned my credentials." Rowe shrugged. "You taught us to trust the chain of command." Rebecca stood. "And I also taught you to verify the source. You didn't learn that part." She turned to Santos. "Get command to freeze Foster's access globally, now." Rowe's voice broke the silence. He said he was fixing what he broke. Rebecca froze at the door. "What?" "He said it was redemption." Her throat tightened. "Redemption doesn't steal, it confesses." She left the room before emotion could betray her composure. That night she sat on the base roof, the Afghan wind cold against her face. The same stars she, once saluted beneath, now looked back without judgment. Foster had made his choice. Maybe guilt drove him, maybe cowardice. It didn't matter. The past had finally looped back to the present. Santos approached quietly. "Command says the leak's neutralized. You stopped it in time." Rebecca nodded absently. "Heading home tomorrow?" he asked. She watched the horizon, endless desert stretching into silence. "I don't know," she said. "Every time I leave this place, it finds me again." Santos hesitated. "Ma'am, people still talk about you here. You're a myth to them, the general who stood alone, who walked through crossfire like it was weather." Rebecca smiled faintly. "Myth is just pain with better lighting." He chuckled softly. "Maybe, but it gives the rest of us hope." Rebecca looked out over the desert one last time. "Hope's worth fighting for, but peace is worth keeping." Santos nodded. "Then keep it, ma'am." She didn't answer. She just kept watching the horizon, the sun beginning to rise. In the distance, the light hit the base fence like fire. And for a moment, everything shimmered past, present, duty, loss, blending into one long breath. Rebecca whispered, almost to the wind, "I came back to end something, not to begin again." But maybe, somewhere deep down, beginnings don't ask permission. How do you say goodbye to a life that never really let you leave? Rebecca asked herself that as the transport plane lifted from Bagram's runway, engines roaring like a memory refusing to die. Outside the window, Afghanistan fell away, endless sand, jagged mountains, scars of battles that never made the news. Inside, soldiers dozed against their gear, heads bowed in exhaustion. Rebecca didn't sleep. She couldn't. She just watched the horizon fade. 6 years ago, she'd left this same airfield broken, humiliated, forgotten. Now she was leaving it whole but not healed. Healing, she'd learned, isn't something time gives. It's something you take back piece by piece in silence. When the wheels touched down on U.S. soil 14 hours later, the cabin broke into soft applause. Some for the flight, some for being alive. Rebecca smiled faintly. She understood both. The Pentagon wanted a debrief. The media wanted a statement. She gave neither. She returned straight to her small home near the Virginia woods. Quiet, simple, walls painted in light tones that didn't echo too much. Her duffel sat untouched by the door. Instead, she went straight to the porch, kicked off her shoes, and sat with a mug of coffee, letting the early light spill across her face. The wind was soft. The world was still. For the first time, stillness didn't feel like waiting. It felt like living. She watched a bird land on the railing, small, steady, unafraid. It reminded her of something she'd forgotten how to be. Then a car approached the gravel path. A black sedan. Government plates. Rebecca exhaled. Of course. The door opened, and Andrew stepped out. He looked older, not tired, changed, the way guilt reshapes a man from the inside. He stopped a few feet away, hands empty, eyes unsure. "You look good." Rebecca didn't smile. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he said softly, "but I needed to say it face to face." "Say what?" "That I told them everything." She blinked. "Everything." He nodded. "The clearance leak, the messages, my part in it. They've opened an investigation. I'm suspended, probably finished, but it's done. You were right, redemption doesn't steal, it confesses." Rebecca studied him. The same man who once couldn't look her in the eye, now meeting her gaze without flinching. "You did the right thing," she said. He swallowed hard. "Too late." "Not for you," she said, "just for us." He nodded slowly. "I figured." They stood there, wind moving between them like an old friend trying to make peace. "Haley left," he said quietly. Rebecca's brows lifted slightly. "Did she?" "She said she needed to find herself. I told her to start by finding the truth." Rebecca nodded. That's a good place to begin. He stepped closer. I read about your foundation. What you're doing, it's incredible. It's necessary, she corrected gently. Andrew smiled faintly, still the same answer. For a moment neither spoke. Birds sang somewhere beyond the trees. Life went on, indifferent and beautiful. Finally Andrew said, I don't expect forgiveness. Rebecca's voice was calm. That's good, because forgiveness isn't something you ask for, it's something you live up to. He looked down, emotion breaking through his composure. You really did save me, twice. She tilted her head. No, I saved who you could still become. He nodded, unable to answer. Rebecca's tone softened. Go live a life that doesn't need to apologize for mine. He looked at her one last time, eyes full of something between gratitude and grief. Goodbye, Rebecca. Goodbye, Andrew. He turned, walked to the car, and drove away. Gravel dust rose, hung for a moment, then faded like everything else that was finally leaving her behind. That night the wind changed. The air smelled like rain, clean, electric, alive. Rebecca stood at the window, watching clouds move across the moon. On her desk lay a sealed folder stamped NATO Resilience Division, approved. Her proposal had passed international review. Her phone buzzed, a text from Private Davis. Ma'am, 38 new members joined today. One said you saved her life. Rebecca smiled. Tell her she saved her own. She set the phone down, pulled her journal closer, and began to write. There are wars that end when the gunfire stops, and wars that end when the silence finally makes sense. I've fought both, and in the quiet between them, I found myself. She closed the book. Outside, the rain began soft at first, then steady. It tapped against the glass like a rhythm she knew by heart. She stepped out onto the porch barefoot, letting the rain soak through her hair, her shirt, her past. The sky rumbled. Somewhere thunder answered. But she didn't flinch. For once, the storm didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something cleansing her. She whispered to the night, I forgive you, world, even if you never asked. Days later, the Resilience Foundation opened its first field center, a small facility outside Arlington, funded by veterans, staffed by volunteers, built on one woman's refusal to disappear. Reporters came, cameras rolled, but when they asked her for a quote, Rebecca simply said, Strength isn't loud, it's consistent. Then she turned away, walking through the center's doors, helping a new recruit fill out a form, smiling like she finally belonged somewhere. Outside, someone had placed a small plaque by the entrance. It read, In honor of those who fought battles no one saw. No signature. No rank. Just truth. That evening, as dusk settled over Arlington, Rebecca visited the quiet part of the cemetery, the section for unnamed soldiers. Rows of white stones stretched endlessly, each one carrying silence heavier than speech. She walked between them slowly, fingers brushing over cold marble. When she reached the far corner, she stopped. There was one stone set apart, not for any reason but chance. She knelt before it. No name, no date, just one word etched deep, unidentified. Rebecca whispered, Not anymore. Then she pressed her palm against the stone, closed her eyes and breathed steady, full, alive. For years, she'd carried the voices of the dead. Now she was finally speaking back. As night fell, she returned home, lit a single candle on her table and sat quietly. The flame flickered, shadows danced, the air was still. She thought of her mother, her sister, Andrew, Roe, the soldiers she lost, and the person she used to be. All of them living somewhere inside her now, no longer ghosts, just lessons. She whispered to the candle, Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The flame steadied, bright and unwavering. Rebecca smiled. And for the first time, truly the first time, The silence felt like home,